Teachers, are you noticing this common pandemic trend in your classroom since returning to in-person learning? More and more of our students are struggling to read grade level materials. In fact, some studies show that nearly half of all of our students in a typical middle school classroom need some sort of extra support with reading and comprehending the textbook. Well, this video is for you. It's geared towards science teachers, but it really applies to anyone teaching in the content areas. Here is my #1 strategy for supporting student reading in your subject. I hope you enjoy. My name is Charlotte Ludolph, and this is my channel, The Trauma Informed Teacher. This is my 26th year in education. I was originally an elementary teacher, so I have experienced what it takes to raise readers in the early grades. When my students returned to face-to-face learning, my first question was, how much learning have they really lost? One of the biggest ways this is showing up in classrooms all over the United States is a gap in grade level reading skills. Without strong reading skills, our students just don't comprehend new subject material in any subject area: math, social studies, science, their career and technical education courses, electives, you name it. Without strong reading and comprehension skills, they're lost in new material, and we're seeing this more and more. So what can you do? The strategy I'm going to show you today is going to help you tremendously. When I've used this in classrooms, it's really improved my students' learning and their ability to identify the information that they need a little help with, that they just don't know. The strategy I'm going to show you is teaching text structures to your students. If you do this, your English language arts teachers are going to love you, because you are going to be supporting skills that they're trying to teach in their classrooms all year long with skills that they need in your subject area. So it's a win-win situation for everyone. Scarborough's reading rope discusses the importance of teaching reading in a multifaceted way. Reading is like a rope. As you can see in this diagram, reading is actually not one skill, but it's actually many, many different skills that are woven together. And you hope that students come to you with at least the bottom part of the rope complete by the time they get to 6th grade in middle school. But because of learning loss during remote learning, and because of all of the challenges that we faced during the pandemic, many of our 6th graders are not coming to us, unfortunately, with all of their phonological awareness, their decoding, their sight word recognition. And then on top of that, they're struggling with vocabulary. They're struggling with background knowledge from not being in the classroom and having the same rich experiences that we would provide them. Those just can't be duplicated in the remote learning environment in exactly the same way, even though we try our best to get students engaged and to give them experiential learning when they're at home. So all of these skills together are important. Today, I'm mainly going to talk to you about background knowledge, verbal reasoning, and an overall awareness of the way that certain types of nonfiction text passages are set up. When we talk about text, we're just talking about anything that you have your students read. It's a common term that English language arts teachers use, but it just means either your textbook reading, some sort of an article, a passage, anything that you need the students to be able to read to understand your concept. So in math, this could be an explanation for a problem. Each one of these types of reading has its own type of setup. And when you think about writing something, you do think about what type of assignment do I have and how should I structure this on my page. But when we think about reading, unless you've been taught to specifically point these things out, as a content area teacher, a science, social studies, CTE teacher, what have you, you don't always think, hey, I need to show my students how this is set up so that when they go to read it, they're going to understand what the author's point is, the main idea, how to find the key details, where to look for information in the charts, graphs, pictures. So teaching text structures is going to help your students with that. All right, now that you know the importance of it, let's get into what that looks like in the classroom. This is an anchor chart that can be used in your classroom, and I would highly encourage you to start this anchor chart one text structure at a time as you're introducing articles or other things that you need to read in your subject area, and fill it in as you go so that students have something that they can reference. They can look up at this chart anytime that they're reading, try to determine what type of structure it is, and think about how to find meaning from what they're reading. So these are structures that you need to explicitly teach, which means that you're not going to just hand the students a graphic organizer and say, this is a descriptive text, right? And have them fill it out. You're going to actually say, here are some of the types of text structures that we can find in our reading in our classroom. One is description. This is a text that describes something. So you're going to hear some examples of what something is like. You're going to hear the author give details about a topic. They might use words, keywords like, for instance, for example, another idea is this. And this is the type of text structure that we can usually diagram using some sort of a web. And you see here, this is one graphic organizer option for descriptive text. And then you would walk students through finding the key ideas and organizing those using the graphic organizer the very first time that you teach it. Then after that, students are going to need to practice this in partners or in small groups until you feel like they can identify the key details in a descriptive text. So what would this look like? Well, let's say that this was a math problem of some sort. Let's look at an example. Here's a common word problem that you might see in an upper elementary classroom. Rhonda has 12 marbles more than Douglas. Douglas has 6 marbles more than Bertha. Rhonda has twice as many marbles as Bertha has. How many marbles does Douglas have? So what this particular word problem is doing is it's describing a situation. You can use this as an example of descriptive text. What are some of the key ideas that we need from this problem in order to solve it? And then this is a great opportunity for students to draw a picture about what's going on. You could use this graphic organizer right here to identify the key details. In math, teachers usually have some sort of system for underlining or circling or highlighting the keywords so that students can find the information that they need and identify if there's too much information in a problem. This is a great chance for you to take out your anchor chart to say, hey, let's make a web with our most important keywords, and then we're going to take it from there. Maybe draw a picture to solve the problem, or what can we do to figure out what the next step is. It's a great way to help your students make their thinking visible as they are doing a math problem. But typically, we don't think of descriptive text as math. It can be used this way. But let's take, for example, a common site that teachers often use. In Newsela or Newsela, you're going to find many articles with current events. Let's say that we're focusing right now on the concept of carnivorous plants. Here's an article what are meat-eating plants? This looks like it could be a good descriptive passage. So as I'm reading this, I'm going to stop after every paragraph or two, and I'm going to ask students to say in their own words kind of what's going on here. I'm going to come up with important information, and then I'm going to create this graphic organizer. I can either do this by sections, like paragraphs that I think go together. So I'll need to make sure I preview the passage ahead of time so I can give students some guidance about which paragraphs go together in a section the first time when I'm demonstrating this. Or I can just write a bunch of key ideas down and then organize my thinking by putting those key details under these clouds here. So I would have a cloud with a key idea, and then I would have the different ideas from other paragraphs that go with that. All right, so let's read and I'll show you an example. I want people to get passionate about plants, says Lisa Van Cleef about a new exhibit at the San Francisco Conservatory of Flowers. Everybody gets excited about the zoo and animals, but once you start looking at plants, you find they have a lot going on too, especially the carnivores or meat eaters. They use the sneakiest of tricks to trap their insect dinners. Take bladderworts, for example. They appear so small and delicate, growing in a quiet pond, but these are the fastest known killers of the plant kingdom. They're able to suck in unsuspecting mosquito larvae in 1/50th of a second using a trapdoor. Once the trapdoor closes on the victim, digestive enzymes similar to those in the human stomach slowly consume the insect. When dinner is over, the plant ejects the remains and is ready to trap again. So if I stop right there, what is this beginning part doing? These first 3 paragraphs. It's really giving you an example, and descriptive text will do that quite often. It will say one example is, another type is this. So basically it's starting off with an example, which is the bladderworts. But in general, what it's saying, they suck in the larvae and then they use digestive enzymes similar to those in the human stomach to slowly consume the insect, ejecting the remains. That is something that as a science teacher, you know that carnivorous plants do that. All types of carnivorous plants do that, not just bladderworts. So you could say, students, if you don't know anything about carnivorous plants already, you should know that these are descriptions of the way that they can eat any type of food that they're going to consume. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to take in whatever they're eating, in this case, mosquito larvae. They're going to have digestive enzymes that consume the insect slowly, and then they're going to third eject the remains and start again. So you could put that under the introduction. You could put an example. So in the middle of this graphic organizer, you would have carnivorous plants. And then you would have a bubble that would say introduction example, bladderworts. And then you would have some ideas, and you can change up the way that these arrows are. So I would have the big like heading in a cloud, and then I would have some details in this like circle coming off of it, right? So you've got the clouds are connected, and then your descriptive details about that particular section of the passage would be coming off of that cloud. So this is just a springboard. You can change these up how you need them to be. But as you go through this, then they're going to talk about more descriptions of how carnivorous plants grow. So carnivorous plants grow in places with soil that doesn't offer much food value. You and I could take a vitamin pill, says Van Cleef, but these amazing plants have had to evolve over thousands of years, developing insect traps to get their nutritional needs met. Just look at all they've done in the fight to survive. The traps can be well disguised to fool the eye, as they are in pitcher plants. These plants get their name because they look like beautiful pitchers full of nectar. The Asian pitcher plant, for example, has a brightly colored rim and an enticing half-closed lid. Curious insects are tempted to come close and take a sip. Then they slide down the slippery slope to their deaths. So what you're going to do after you read this section is you're going to have to lead your students to recognize that the first part here, this paragraph, is talking about all carnivorous plants. But then the next section, these 2 paragraphs, it's actually talking about picture plants. So would these go in the same part of your graphic organizer? No, these are 2 different ideas, right? So what you're doing is you're helping the students recognize that within a descriptive section of your textbook or descriptive section of an article that they read, there are going to be different ways that the author tries to illustrate their point. And you're going to get the big ideas from reading all these different examples in a descriptive text. And your job as the reader is to figure out what's the big idea and then how do all these little ideas connect. By creating this type of web, the students are going to see what are the big ideas and what are the supporting ideas. That's so important to them when it comes to comprehending what they're learning. How often have you had a student where they are going to get so excited about one particular example that they're learning about in science? And that's great because that helps them connect to the subject, but they're over focusing on that and they're missing the big picture concept that you're trying to teach. This is one way that you can really help students understand, okay, here's the big thing that you need to learn, and then these are just some examples. So focus on the big thing because we can apply those big ideas, the ones that I would put in the clouds on this graphic organizer, to many different examples in science rather than just the specific example of a pitcher plant or the specific example of a Venus flytrap that our students probably already relate to. This gives you some ways of really introducing good language to the students. It's going to go with what they're learning about. It's going to improve that oral vocabulary, conversations back and forth with you and your students in the classroom, with them hearing you as the fluent model of academic vocabulary for this specific subject area. That's going to be so wonderful for them when they then have to go back and read more detail about whatever you're learning. So this would be a good introductory activity that you could later follow up with other, semi-independent partner work, group work, or individual work at a later time. If you use the gradual release of responsibility in your classroom as a model for teaching, at least some of the time, this type of thing comes at the beginning during that modeling time and during that shared learning with your class. And then later you assign other activities for practice that you're going to kind of give them less and less support as they are able to read more on their own. Usually I find that once I have spent time doing an activity like this with my students, so many of my students are able to engage in the information because they have that shared experience of doing the descriptive text together with you, and they have the background knowledge of whatever it is that you're learning about. And some of that vocabulary from having those conversations with you, so that then when they go to read something on their own, they're going to recognize more of the words, they're going to connect more because you've already activated their thinking, which is really important for comprehension. So this is just a great strategy in so many different ways. I could show you different examples for sequence, which is your order of events. Compare and contrast, which we do so often in science and social studies. Problem solution, which is done in social studies a lot. It's done in science during experiments. It's done in math, obviously, when students are describing how they solved a problem, or when they're looking at an example of a solved problem. And then cause and effect is done in so many different ways in current events, lots of different subject areas. So I could show you examples of all of those, but what I want to do now is I want to show you some place that you can go where you can get free templates for graphic organizers that students can fill out online. The first time I do this, I would do it on a big chart paper, or I would do it large on my whiteboard for students to see, or I would use my interactive board and do it as like a virtual whiteboard. But after that, I would probably have students practice on paper some, but then once they have already been introduced to it and had a little practice, it's good for you to give them an opportunity to use the same strategy to read something new on the same topic, but they can do their work online. So here is my suggestion. This is Canva. There is a free version and there's a paid version. As always, you're not going to have access to as many bells and whistles with the free version, but for the purposes of using this in your classroom, there are so many templates that are free. If you go to Canva, canva.com, you can type in the word infographics and up comes all of these choices. Anything that has a crown on it is not free, but if it doesn't have the little crown on it, it is a free infographic. So you see like right here, that's pro. You would have to have the paid subscription, but many of these are free. And you are going to be able to find things that would work for descriptive text, things that would work for a sequence of events. You will find timelines on here. You're going to find things that you could put in graph and chart form. There's so many different ones that you can use for free. And all you would do is maybe give students a choice of a couple of them so they're not overwhelmed, and say you can use this one or you can use this one, whichever one you like. But you can go in here and you can show them. Let me see if I can find a good one for this. I'm going to use this one. It's called, the particular example is types of volcanoes, and I can come down here and I can change this to make it larger so you can see better what's going on. Instead of doing types of volcanoes, I can click here, I can change my background, although this one might work for me since I'm doing carnivorous plants. I could do types of carnivorous plants. Or I could even do features of carnivorous plants, which is more what my article is about. Okay, so here what they've done is they've just given a definition. So a carnivorous plant is a plant that digests its food using enzymes similar to those in the human stomach. It then ejects the remains. Okay, so that's sort of a definition. And then down here, we're going to have to write about the different things that we have learned. So what are some of the things that we've learned? We've learned here that they're the fastest known killers, that they suck unsuspecting mosquito larvae in 1/50th of a second. So one feature is that they are sneaky and quick. So then you could use this as your supporting detail. They grow in places with soil that doesn't offer much food value. So they grow in odd places, and then you could use this as your descriptive detail. And then this pitcher plant, it's talking about how they are well disguised to fool the eye and they look beautiful. So you could put as another feature of the carnivorous plants that they have visual details that attract their prey and fool them into thinking it's safe, right? And use that as your descriptive detail. And you could go on and on, but basically that's an example of how you can use this particular type of infographic to help your students organize visually what they're learning in the text. So those are my suggestions to you. Play around with this. See how this will fit into your own curriculum. If you are a social studies teacher, you could use this approach to teach sequence. You could teach using timelines. You already use timelines, I'm sure, in your social studies lessons. But did you realize that that's a reading skill, to teach students to read a timeline, that they're learning that this is an order that things happen in. It can be just a first, next, then, and last, or it can be actual years that things happen, depending on what type of passage you're reading or what section of your textbook you're reading. This is just going to be something that is so versatile and can be used in so many different ways. If you need more ideas for how to teach the different types of text structure or examples that are good for the different text structures, I'll put some of those below in the description. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at thetraumainformedteacher20@gmail.com. I will also put my email down below just in case you need it again later if you forget. But thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope that you will enjoy using text structures in your class as a way to really impact your students' ability to read and comprehend better. As always, thanks for listening. Don't forget to work hard, be kind, and amazing things will happen. Bye-bye.